Let's continue then to stay with this topic and speak to the National Informal Traders Alliance of South Africa President Rosheda Muller. Rosheda, a very good afternoon to you and thank you so much for your time. I just want to start off where, in fact, my colleague Hasina left off. We understand, of course, that some people have now been given a small extension until tomorrow morning. Is that information accurate? Are you also getting that information from various other centres?
Well, even if I got the information, it's definitely not enough time. We have just received notification from the Department of Small Business Development that there will be a meeting of parliamentarians. An announcement will be made tomorrow on full statistics and the way forward. But as NITASA, we have made it very clear that, the D-date is definitely not, cannot be now. As much awareness and education for those who are not compliant has to be given.
I think a lot of us appreciate the fact that 21 days can never be enough, in the sense that, so many Spaza shops and other shops have been unregulated by the South African government for many, many years. And this is a first-time process for many of those legitimate business owners to now be regulated and now undergo this process. But I'm sure you would also appreciate that there is some sense of urgency here. We are doing this because of what has transpired in the last couple of weeks, where we saw hundreds of, South African children and in some cases adults being contaminated or eating food that is contaminated, landing in hospital, many of them, of course, losing their lives. I think there were about 20 children who passed on in Gauteng alone. So there is that sense of urgency. Is that an appreciation that you also have? And if so, what then would you want to happen in as far as Spaza shops that are still operational, when there is this deadline and this urgency to close down those that may be illegally operating and also selling contaminated food?
Yes, indeed, we concur with all of that. We support government in the registration. However, it cannot be a hop and skip matter. This has been going on for decades, and now we have to conform. Because of the tragedies that happened in our country, we are now hopping and skipping and jumping to get everyone on board with compliance. We agree it must take place, but not in a rush that is happening now. As you have heard there are rows and queues at municipalities. They do not have the capacity to see to all the traders who want to be registered and be compliant. So definitely NITASA extends a hand to assist government on the ground wherever we are across the country, to ensure and to send up people for training, awareness, etc. But you must remember, it's not only Spaza shops. Throughout the country, there are thousands and hundreds of thousands of food vendors, people who are busy with selling foods, frying meat, selling begonias for a survival. And we need to take that into consideration. The informal economy is the biggest employment sector in our country, and that is where people find themselves earning a living. So we need to sit around the table and discuss with government how we resolve all these matters. Government cannot operate alone.
You are proposing things, and I think a lot of people would agree with you, that are long-term, Rosheda, because as we all have been saying, that Spaza shops are really the backbone of the township community or economy at the very least. I think there is that appreciation and understanding. But in the interim, what are you proposing? Because if the deadline is extended, some people would still be then allowed to operate.
Well, I think they should be allowed to operate, but we need the health inspectors to be more visible on the ground. that they should be tending to whoever is busy with dealing with food, like you have at every taxi rank, at every market square, every street corner. You're going to find somebody buying meat, selling food, making magonias. So how can we address this? Let's put our heads together. Let's, for example, look at how we can do it from provincial to district to local municipalities in an organized manner where the informal sector assists government in the execution of this very serious issue.
Last week, we heard from, the Minister of Small Business that at that time, there were around about 59,000 Spaza shops that were registered during this process. And of those 59,000 Spaza shops registered, 93% of them were foreign nationals. What is your response to that in as far as, who really owns most of these Spaza shops in this country? And I'm not only talking here about illegal foreign nationals, I'm talking in totality, just anyone residing here, whether they're legal or not, but not necessarily South African.
Yes, indeed. You see, when our borders opened 30 years ago, there was a flood of African members coming into our country, which they realized that they could easily do business. I do understand that many of them have gone to landlords to ask them to occupy a space of their land and run Spaza shops from there. And we need to realize that it was an income for the local trader to allow a foreign Spaza shop to open on their grounds. They, the landlord, were not aware of, regulations and what had to be implemented. So I think it was, again, lack of awareness, lack of communication, and advantage taken, yes, by those coming into our country. And that is why there's such a huge uproar at the moment, because 90% of the Spaza shops are not owned by our local people. And we need to realize, you must also take into consideration the members from Africa, from all over. They had years of bartering, decades. They come from their fathers and forefathers being traders, whereas we in South Africa are only being allowed to become businesses now, since our democracy. So it's a deep issue, and it's an issue that government, not alone, with regard to all stakeholders, sit around a diaspora and decide what is best for economic, local empowerment, and how do we also deal with the foreign legal traders as illegal traders. Definitely, we don't agree that they should be operating in our country.
Rosheda, thank you so much for your time. Certainly many factors that need to be also considered here, as you're saying, lots to discuss. Thank you so much for your time. And Rosheda Muller there is the president of the National Informal Traders Alliance.